TTB Music Podcast.
Happy September.
Oh God, you got me. Hello.
Yes. Welcome to Indian summer.
Indian summer.
Indian summer week.
It's dark outside, but it sure is hot.
It is. It's getting hot in here. Welcome to podcast, I don't know what it is, I think. 8,
Are we
9?
going to say 9? I think it's 8. I think we've missed one sometime this year.
10, 11,
Whatever. It's September.
Yeah. But anyhow, 6 albums as per usual. And this month we have Dolly Parton, Pure and Simple, Britney Spears, Glory, Ryley Walker, Golden Sings, something, goes on for a while. John Paul White, Acts of Civil Wars, Beulah, Gigs, Landlord, and Viola Beach. But we shall start with Dolly and her 43rd album.
That's yeah, okay.
You know, I mean...
43 solo albums.
Yeah, and her third in 5 years. For the 70 years young Miss Parton.
She's hitting the creative period.
Yes. Well, is she, Pete? You tell me.
I don't know. Well, I do know because I have listened to it.
Yay! That's a leap of stars. We're off to a good start.
I'm actually quite surprised. I was like, 43? 43, okay. And I'm ashamed to say it's 70. Oh,
Yeah.
I actually thought she was older. Anyway.
Her wigs are older.
I digress. Okay, Dolly Parton's Pure and Simple is an album that, if you have seen her Glastonbury appearance of late, or have actually engaged with what Dolly Parton's doing these days, or if you're just a general fan of that sort of country sound, it's all right. I mean, it's middle of the road, and I'll be honest with you, it's probably one of the weaker.
It is middle of the road, yeah.
Yeah, it's very middle of the road.
Very old school country.
It's very old school country. But actually, what I liked about this album was in a few of the tracks, particularly the like of which, like I'm 16 and Head Over Heels, you actually get a sense of someone that still has a zest for life, is still sort of can sing authoritatively about what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be amorous, or sexual, or what it's like to be in that position. And actually hearing that from Dolly Parton after all these years is kind of really nice, you know. So it's kind of hard to sort of rail against that and say, well, you know, this is just an old country star singing about country, because actually there's quite a bit here that's entertaining lyrically. But as I say, it is quite middle of the road. I don't. It's probably sold the bucket load over stateside, but I can't see it being the sort of big success here. But it clearly taps into that thing that we've been tapping into the last few years around country, and around how country is now much more mainstream, even here, than it was a couple of years ago.
Definitely.
And she's perfectly tapped into that. It isn't the best country album we've done. It's not the best country album by or country sort of type album by a how can I be polite, an elder statesperson of country that we've done this year. But actually it's all right. I'm not going to knock it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's certainly not top drawer Dolly by any means, but you know, you can tell that she knows her craft. It kind of shows through on the record. You know, she's been the reason she has churned out, and I mean churned out in the nicest possible way, 43 albums, is the fact that her output has been quite consistent and of reasonably good quality over those years. You know, she still writes all her own material. You know, and there's a couple of great songs to tell. The title track, Pure and Simple, opens it up. Everything's really nice. And I also liked Never Not Love You, which is near the start of the album as well, which I think was a nice track. And then the rest of it is, you know, it's fine. It benefits by some restrained production, so the production doesn't go over the top, and doesn't try and kind of over orchestrate everything. But yeah, it's the kind of thing that if you're a Dolly Parton fan, you're going to buy the album and think, yeah, it's a Dolly Parton album, it's alright.
Yeah.
But it's not one you're going to buy and go, wow, this is the best album ever.
So why are you really buying this album or downloading it on Spotify or whatever?
Probably because you're a fan, I'm guessing. And you have the previous 42 albums.
or if you go for the special edition, you get the live album experience from Glastonbury.
Live in quotes.
Yes, indeed. So no, it's as you say, you don't get to 43 or even 70 without having something left to sort of offer. It's a good album, but it's, as I say, not the greatest of the batch here.
Right, we move on to the ninth album from Britney Spears.
Really?
Glory.
Wow. We got some stats tonight, folks.
We have. And let's be honest, I don't really think there have been many people who have been particularly pining for a new Britney album, at least.
Apart from Kevin Bacon in that advert.
Well, yeah. Not the least I know. I mean, this is a woman who's essentially been playing Vegas for the last several years, and is still booked to carry on playing Vegas through next year, I think.
Okay.
And an artist for me, for whom her last great song was 10 years ago, which was Piece of Me, off the Blackout album in 26-27.
No.
And so I wasn't really holding out any hopes for this record, particularly. So I'm sure, as people are listening, they're probably thinking, is there a but coming? There is, actually. This is, I would say, possibly her best collection of songs, if not ever, then certainly for a long time. Yes, there's no kind of Hit Me Baby, Oops, Toxic or Piece of Me type standout track, on the record. But similarly, on the albums that those tracks were on, there was a hell of a lot of filler. Hell of a lot of filler.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I think, is quite a well-constructed collection of modern pop songs. There's the usual kind of leanings towards R&B on things like Slumber Party, Love Me Down. I know the compulsory current pop tropes are in there as well. But then you get some interesting bits, like you've got some kind of ethereal pop on Invitation at the start of the album, which I think is one of the stronger tracks on the record. You've got some kind of banging club music on Clumsy. And then a bizarre almost Lulu Paloma Faith thing on What You Need towards the tail end of the album. And it all kind of works quite well. There's an interesting mix of vocals on the album, very good sounding vocals. So whether Britney's singing it or not is open for debate, as it often happens when there's good singing on a Britney album. But she's got a good selection of songwriters writing with her. So Justin Tranter, who was one of the co-writers of the NCE's Cake by the Ocean, the songs of the summer, and his writing partner Julia Michaels, a pair of them co-wrote the current Gwen Stefani album. They've written half this album, and it's kind of good. I mean, I highlights for me are Do You Want to Come On Over, which is a kind of Prince, Wendy and Lisa thing with a bit of Pharrell-esque guitar in it, which is quite good. The aforementioned Invitation, which I quite like. And I think it's either, I can't remember if it's Just Love Me or Just Like Me.
Just Love Me.
Which is also...
Just Like Me, yeah.
Which is also pretty good. So overall, I was pleasantly surprised. So it's not an album that I would rush out and kind of buy in hard copy or anything, but yeah, it's one of the better pop records we've reviewed.
I would agree with you to a point. This was the first of the current batch, this podcast that I listened to, and I was pleasantly surprised, if I'm honest. I thought, we're doing a Britney album, wait! But actually, as you say, this is a really solid collection of songs. It doesn't have any of those previously aforementioned heights, but it there isn't really anything on here that's bad.
No,
it's all pretty good filler.
You can imagine most of it being released as singles and happily humming away to it on the radio. And
it's funny when you mentioned Do You Want to Come Over, I really did feel Prince was in the room at that point, which was nice considering. and it's a good album. Where it fell down for me was on second or third listen. I actually started to think, okay, maybe it's not so great as I initially thought. It was had an immediate impact, but actually on repeated listen was perhaps not so great. But that said, there's some quite good moments on here lyrically. There's quite humorous moments on here lyrically as well. And when you think about Britney, when you think about her work over the years, this is actually quite a proper album. You know, this feels like a comeback's probably a strong word, but it feels like an artist who's carefully considered her next move and has put this out there. And actually, it's all right. It's respectable in terms of
as better than Kim once said.
Yeah, respectable in terms of her musical output, but perhaps less respectable in terms of, I guess quality. I guess what I'm coming around to is I feel that there's still a really good Britney album in there somewhere, but it's not this one. Maybe it's another few years down the line.
Britney Unplugged.
Britney Unplugged, absolutely. So it's an enjoyable record, and it's got some critical acclaim here and there, which is probably deserved.
Yeah, but obviously you need to not make the mistake I did on my first listen, which was listening to the deluxe version, which is almost double the length.
Yeah. And for my money, Toxic's the last big song of hers I liked.
It's still the best song. Written by our own delightful Kathy Dennis, of course.
Of course, yes.
So we change tact quite dramatically.
Yeah, we certainly
did. We move on to the fourth album, I think the fourth album in like 3 years, from a young gentleman called Ryley Walker, Golden Things That Have Been Sung. Try saying that when you've had a drink.
I will attempt so in a moment.
Yeah, so only 8 tracks, 40 minutes.
Feels longer. Oops, spoiler. Does feel longer than that.
I have written, does feel quite long.
It feels much longer than 40 minutes. I have a funny story which I'll come back to in a moment. This is all right. This is all right. We've listened to plenty of albums of this ilk over the last couple of years at least, if not longer. There's some very humorous moments in here, genuinely humorous. I know I say this a lot when I review albums, but some very humorous moments are in this. When we're, for example, when we're playing footsie with Jesus, and boy, he has a soft touch, and the next round is on me, but obviously it'll have to be water because I'm poor. So sort of some great stories in there. But as you've alluded to, some of the tracks feel just a little bit too long and a little bit too serious, apart from the sort of comedy or unintentionally funny lyrics at times. It just feels a little bit too long for me. That said, positively speaking, again, nothing really to fault musically.
He's clearly a very gifted guitarist and musician.
Very gifted musician. Each of the compositions feels fully thought out. So for me, this was again good record. It's not going to challenge my lists for the year, but then again, we've listened to far worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a record with a really big kind of 70s kind of John Martin, Al Stewart, Nick Drake, Isaac Guillory acoustic folk rock vibe to it, and surprisingly also with a kind of added addition of some Grateful Dead for additional good measure.
You've just done all the references.
I know. And the opening track kind of perfectly encapsulates that kind of whole kind of thing and that whole kind of vibe, and also demonstrates how well it can be done. The first opening track is just delightful. When we listened to this the first time round, I was thinking, yeah, I like this album. And then by the time I got to the end of the first listen, I was similar to you, but the only thing I'd written down as a note on first listen was, feels long, it's only 40 minutes. And, I think whilst the album has grown on me on subsequent listens since then, I still think that criticism holds true, and I think the album would have benefited by several tracks being cut down a bit closer to the I Will Ask You Twice's 2 minutes, as opposed to Age Old Tales 8 minutes. And it just you find the album kind of drifting somewhat in a kind of improv kind of way. And I think
like it.
But I think he is that kind of artist. I think he is that kind of person who you and that's why I mentioned the Grateful Dead. It's the kind of person, if you went and saw live, that could be just a random, 10-minute noodle in the middle.
Something of the Jesse Marlin story about it.
Middle of the track, just kind of going off on one. And also that's kind of the kind of music is very, very laid back. Ideal for a sunny day, actually. Very laid back.
Oh, absolutely.
And I found myself wondering whether I should be kind of back in my student days, kind of like lighting up a spliff and just kind of like chilling and kind of going.
As I said, funny story coming up.
And I was going to, until this morning, I was going to say, but yeah. So apart from the first track and I Will Ask You Twice, the album doesn't really, in the end, grab me. But then I listened to it again on the way into work this morning. I suddenly found I'd kind of moved from indifference to parts of it to actually quite liking. So I think this. So I think this is actually a potential grower. But I think you need to be in that kind of very laid back, kicking back kind of frame of mind to connect with it.
Oh, indeed.
But yeah, it's an interesting record.
So, the first time I listened to this, I fell asleep. I know you might have noticed I'm carrying a slight injury at the moment, so maybe I have a few restless nights.
Yes, Peter's currently doing an impersonation of one of our long-standing listeners.
I've been warned off carrying my stick to the next gig, but hey. So I'm sort of carrying a bit of an injury, so maybe I'm not sleeping too good. About track 5 or 6 of the Ryley Walker album, I actually just dozed off and woke up in the middle of our next record.
Wow, okay. Which is
John Paul White, Beulah.
Beulah.
And this is nothing against Ryley Walker, but perhaps it's something against John Paul White, in that I didn't really notice the transition.
Well, there you go. So we've got John Paul White, who, as some of you may remember, was part of the band The Civil Wars with Joy Williams, whose first post-Civil Wars album we reviewed last year. And we were both fairly kind of lukewarm about it, I seem to recall. Although what was interesting about that record was that she clearly made a conscious decision to move away from the kind of Civil Wars sound, whereas John Paul White certainly hasn't.
Or having a go at her ex.
Yeah, well, it certainly hasn't on this album, which sounds very much like the Civil Wars musically. Now, if like me, you like the Civil Wars, and you've got an album that reminds you of them, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But at the same time, I think in the first half of the record, I think it's potentially its biggest problem.
Yes.
Because whilst there are tracks on it that are just good in and of themselves, particularly the opener, Black Leaf, which I think is a fine example of that. Other tracks such as What's So and I Make You Want to Cry, picking the two most obvious examples for me, kind of leave you thinking they could just be that notch better with the addition of Joy Williams' vocal harmonies coming in. They're just... It's almost like there's that spot in the track that's just there for her to be doing a vocal.
Yeah.
So that's a slight criticism, I suppose. In that, what I do like about the record is that it's wonderfully bleak and bitter.
Really?
Yeah, it's not a happy record. This.
No.
And it's not as if it's one of those albums where he's clearly having a go at her either. The songs where he's talking about is marriage and stuff like that. He's happily married, although some of the lyrics you're thinking, really? And it is just wonderfully, wonderfully bleak. There are other moments that I quite like. I like Fight For You simply because that's definitely a hello, John Bon Jovi's Lawyers. because it is Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi, almost note for note, riff-wise. And then there's the kind of least Civil Wars track on the album is a track called The Martyr towards the end of the album, which actually reminded me a bit more of kind of Joe Pug.
Yeah. Yes.
So overall, I think it's a good record, and I've enjoyed listening to it. And once you can get past the wanting to hear Joy Williams' voice coming in on some of the tracks, I think it works quite well. It's kind of nicely paced, not overly long, quite focused. And like I said, I love a bleak and bitter record as well. So generally speaking, thumbs up.
Okay. I probably need to give this yet another listen because of sleep problems. But it for me, this just felt it just like something. Whereas the previous record clearly was distinct in how one approached it, this just felt like a bit more of the same. And I know you're a fan, so that's probably a good thing. But for me, it was very much okay. So this is kind of what I've heard before, lacking obviously Joy Williams for obvious reasons, and boy are those reasons obvious when you listen to some of this. I mean, it goes so far as the track. I've been over this before. Actually brings in a substitute teacher. You know,
yes, it does.
It really feels like
it's like I need some female vocals on this track.
Okay,
let's just bring somebody in. Yeah,
and it just feels. On some tracks, it just feels bitter, and on other tracks, it just feels bleak. And for me, I you know, fair enough. You're an artist, very much singing from the heart on the sleeve, very much singing from the heart there. But for me, I just found this a very uncomfortable listen, knowing something of what I know about the band. Now, coming to this brand new, you think, blimey, this is brilliant. This is exactly the soundtrack to my heartbreak or my marriage, sort of caving in and coming down. But for me personally, it was just no. I've got nothing against it, but musically, but no, not one of my favourites.
So how about cheery South London instead?
Okay,
gigs and Landlord.
Obviously,
rap. We return to rap.
Of all the albums on this particular podcast, as a increasingly middle-aged white guy from the north of England, this was the album to which I most relate. I actually really enjoyed this. I thought this was a really good album. Okay, vocally, there might be some issues there, but he's got the smarts to actually bring in some of his more famous friends to cover for that. Yeah. Lyrically, a really good mix of sort of it's kind of like grime versus hey, this is what I'm going through now.
Yeah.
And what he's going through now is actually now I'm increasingly middle-aged and I have 2 kids and I live this life, and I used to live this other life, and that life was quite exciting, and now I pretend that didn't happen, or still doesn't quite happen around the edges. So I'm just trying to do what a man in my position can. But actually, there was some really nice local references as well.
Yeah, Lewisham gets a big up.
Sham, the Sham
gets a couple of
gets a sham.
Sentences in.
Exactly. And I've said this before about really good rap albums. Some of them, and less so on this one, but some of the most interesting things happening in electronic music are happening in the background to many of these albums. There's some really sort of quirky, interesting things happening musically. One of the criticisms of this album, which I've observed, is that actually sort of lo-fi production is one of the things that counts against it, along with his own vocal talent. Not lyrically, of course, but sort of musically, spoken word. But actually, I actually find that quite endearing, and it reminded me, and this is going to sound way out of left field, it actually reminded me of the Streets album.
Okay.
A Grand Don't Come for Free, when you had very lo-fi follow-up to a very successful album, where the protagonist tells a story, and this to me felt a bit like the grime opera.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So for me, I actually really enjoyed this record. What can I say?
What I can say is the biggest positive about this record is it's not Drake.
Yes, I did write that down. Here's a man that's happy with his life.
Yeah.
Woe is me with all my, money and girls and stuff.
If I had no other good words to say about this album, that would almost be enough, frankly, to make this the rap album of the year. Because within the first minute, it's already better than the entire several years of the Drake album.
How miserable was that record?
And I clearly didn't like it as much as you have, although I do agree with you that there is a lot to admire on it. Lyrically, it's, as you say, it is a mixture of kind of comedy, kind of gangster rap, traditional kind of gangster rap tropes, and, as you say, my God, I'm getting old. I need to start acting like an adult, but I've still got that past life and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then just, the great thing about listening to a British rap album as opposed to an American album is you find yourself walking down the street, headphones in, listening to something, and you kind of think, wow, Stephen Gerrard's taking up rapping. When suddenly in the middle of the best you get A-Star, who's a Scouser rapper, who I hadn't heard of before, but who's just brilliant. I loved it.
Brilliant.
And the best is...
rapping about talk stuff.
Yeah, and the best is possibly my favourite track on the album. It's just great. In fact, I think the second half of the album is the better half of the record as well,
I agree.
think.
Yeah.
So from kind of Lock Dough, which is just before the best, onwards, I think it's definitely stronger. Particularly like the use of the kind of Public Enemy sample in Savage, and of course, which is kind of...
That's nice.
That's kind of the deep...
That's the deep one.
Track
but
about
it's heartfelt though.
It is very heartfelt.
Yeah. Except when you remember the circumstance.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a lot to say positively about Gig's Landlord, and a lot of reasons for wishing it success. It certainly shows once again that there's a strong and good rap grime movement still present in the UK, particularly in London area, still making interesting music.
Yeah, we've done in our course over the years, we've done a few albums that have kind of had that London feel to them, and I think there's a lot to say about the sort of UK scene up against the US scene, and actually being a bit closer, in fact being much closer to the origins of decent rap music.
Well said.
Word.
So, let's end on a happy note,
shall we?
And we end with the debut and final album from Viola Beach. Viola Beach, for those who weren't aware, this is the band who unfortunately kind of died when their car went off a bridge in Stockholm earlier on this year. Them and their manager all died, and this basically just a young group of lads. And so now the album comes out, or it came out about a month ago, I think. And it's one of those, in a way, it's quite funny. I was in two minds whether to put it on the list of this review or not, because it's one of those kind of things where you're thinking there's almost going to be that tendency to either be too kind to it because of the circumstances, or potentially kind of go the other way of thinking, okay, I'm not going to be too kind to it just because, they're dead and it's their only album. I'm going to be even more critical of it than I would of anything else. Yeah. And I think I was almost leaning that way on kind of second listen to the record, but I've kind of pulled back from that now. Basically, what we have is, a perfectly okay debut album. It's not great. It's not crap. It's, to use your old stalwart word, it's a solid record. It's a collection of kind of light indie.
Yeah, I've already used it once. I can't use it.
Yeah, that if I was being honest, is slightly more Haircut 100 than the Smiths.
Yeah.
I don't mean that necessarily in a kind of negative way, because Packet wanted to make some decent songs.
Yeah.
And Nick Haywood made a couple of very fine solo albums in the 90s, actually. Tangled and Apple Bed, I think the one's called. Worth checking out if you're a Nick Haywood fan, or if you just would like something new to listen to. And yeah, so I listened to this album, and it is one of those things you're thinking, it's almost unfair to review it in some ways, because you're thinking, because we can't really say, is this the start of something? Are they going to get better? Is this that kind of album that sparks off a growth that delivers a classic album in 3 albums' time? Because this is it, really.
Yeah, this is it. It's kind of irrelevant having that thought, but you do wonder.
Yeah, I do, but it's great. It's fine. Like I said, there's nothing on it that's outstanding, but songs like Swings and Water Slides, which kind of kick off the album, and I think Really Want to Call and stuff, are kind of fun pop songs.
Yeah. Spiritually, it did remind me of Definitely Maybe. Not in terms of sound, but in terms of, here's a collection of songs that we put together, and this is who we are. It's that sort of statement. I think, unfortunately, because of the circumstances, there's probably a little bit less thought in terms of, well, this is what we've got, so we've got to put it together somehow.
Yeah.
And had they had the benefit of the debut that probably wanted to do, I think it would have been even better than this. But hey, that's an alternative reality we can't go into with this one. I actually think this is a cracking indie record. And I mentioned Oasis. It starts like Liam, and somewhere it ends like Alex Turner from the Arctic Monkeys. So clearly those 20 years of great could have been indie bands of great success and lesser success later on, is in there. So you do wonder, this with a cracking debut, probably an awesome follow-up, and then who knows, probably hopefully they wouldn't have gone the way of those other bands, but hey, I think it's really, I won't say solid, because I think it's better than solid. It's a really good album. I think that what we've got here as a tribute, as a collection of songs, as a sense of what this band was about. This is awesome, and it just, in many ways, it's a happy record, and then
yes, I'd agree with that, definitely.
And then of course it's bittersweet, because you're reminded of actually what the fate of this band was, and that in itself seems like such a crying shame. What a shitty year this has been in terms of loss. So it's, for me, it's more than a solid album. For me, in terms of the podcast overall this time around at this batch of songs, this is my favourite album that involves guitars. That makes sense. Whereas the previous album reviewed was my favourite album in terms of not guitars. Yeah. It's a really, it's well recommended. It's a good album.
It's all right.
Okay.
So there goes another.
Well, I've revealed my play. What's yours?
I think quite difficult actually this month for me to pick what my favourite, because nothing blew me away this month. So I think it would be. Yeah, I would struggle. I think it would depend on mood.
Yeah.
Whether it was Giggs, Jumper or White, Ryley Walker, or even Britney.
Yeah.
Depending on what mood I was in.
Depending on mood. Okay.
But so it's actually, there's no obvious winner this month for me.
No.
Return next month and we have some unknown artists on the review list.
Oh, who?
So Nick Cave.
Never heard of him.
Speaking of people that have had happy times recently.
Times. Yeah.
So that'll be another uplifting album, no doubt. Divine Comedy.
Good.
And others.
I look forward to it.
Till then.